watching this, I'm dead.
Boy, if you don't
I have finally beaten Gotham Knights, and I gotta be honest, I actually enjoyed it way more than I expected. After seeing some gameplay and hearing about the performance limitations, and I guess mostly hearing about other people's comments and concerns, I was really starting to fear that this was going to be a bad game. But I can confidently say that it is not that bad. Now, I'm not fixing to claim that it's a masterpiece because it is far from it. I don't think this game is a 10 out of 10, a 9, or even an 8 out of 10, but it's certainly not a 1, 2, or 3 out of 10 either. So over the past few days, I have somehow managed to sink nearly 40 hours into this game already. And I'm probably going to regret that because I have been seriously procrastinating on some of my schoolwork. I've got like 3 papers due soon. But, you know, it's fine. It'll be okay. But yeah, anyways, I don't plan on going into a crazy amount of detail because, like I said, I've only had time to play through the whole story once. But I do have thoughts and opinions on it, so let's get right into it. Real quick before we get started, I do want to preface a couple things real quick. For starters, I am going to be comparing this to the Arkham games some, not a lot, but a couple of times. But I do totally understand that it is a completely different game, completely different continuity. But just keep that in mind. There's not a lot of other mediums to compare it to, so I don't have much of a choice here. Also, there will be some spoilers, but I will let you know before I actually start getting into those. So for those of you who haven't played it yet or haven't finished, you are safe for now. I was actually surprisingly impressed with the character design in this game. The 4 playable characters I think actually looked really solid. I think Nightwing looked really cool. I think Red Hood looks really cool, especially with the scar that you can see there. And I think Robin was nice and dorky, as you can see in the clip that's actually playing right now. And I actually want Batgirl to have my children. But, you know, jokes aside, I actually do really like the 4 main characters. I think they look really great. I was also pleasantly surprised by the costume design for the 4 playable characters. There is a ton of options for each of them, and I actually really like the looks of majority of them. And even those that I didn't like, I could easily override using one of what is called a transmog suit without sacrificing the stats of the one I had crafted. I also thought it was really cool that on each of the craftable suits you could change the symbol, the mask, the sleeves, and the shoes on each of them. It was just a really nice touch that I didn't expect. To be honest, character design doesn't really bother me that much for the most part. They did well in the main 4 characters, and they did well in the costumes, like I said, so the design for everyone else is pretty tertiary for me. However, I still have an opinion on them, but any negative opinion is hardly a big factor in my eyes. So real quick, I didn't love the Batman design. I didn't hate it, but they made up for it by confirming that he has tiny nipples and a very hairy chest. I would show it, but I can't because... for starters, it's a little weird, but also the scene that you see, it's at a very important part and it's full of spoilers, so I can't really show you that. Another design that I didn't love was probably Clayface. I think he looked a little weird for me, and I understand that his whole thing is being a giant muddy clay monster, but it looks gross, but not like in a good way. He actually just doesn't look good in my opinion. He looks weirdly wet, and I much prefer the Arkham series Clayface design, which again, it's not a big deal breaker for me. Now, aside from them, I think everyone else was perfectly fine. Nothing really stood out good or bad. I didn't have many complaints about Harley, Mr. Freeze, or the other main villains. Alfred seemed very Alfred-like. Again, just nothing too crazy. The map in this game is actually rather large, and whenever you have a big map, good traversal is a necessity. You start out being able to grapple, and you have the bat cycle. Now, grappling is fine. Of course, it's not as efficient as Spider-Man games because, well, you're not Spider-Man. But again, it's fine. You can grapple similar to how you could in the Arkham games, and you can even launch at the end, similar to the boost. Not as efficient, but it's still an option, and it's a fine option, I think. Now, the bat cycle, on the other hand, well, the bat cycle is a freaking lie. This thing actually kind of annoyed me. I mean, I eventually got used to it, but for starters, it feels so heavy to drive. I don't know how else to describe it. I recently replayed Cyberpunk, and it feels similar to that. Just kind of clunky and heavy. Now, they try and trick you by putting those little speed lines or wind lines, whatever you want to call them, in the corner of the screen, but it just doesn't successfully trick you. It still feels like you're going super slow. And the only way to customize the bike is by changing the color, which, again, is cool, but it really needs actual upgrades, similar to the Arkham games, how you can upgrade the Batmobile. In the game, you can actually see some emails that are sent between different characters of the game, and I think it's really interesting. And one of the emails that you see is actually from Red Hood to Robin, and he actually talks about how maybe you could use Freeze's cryogel to help cool the parts to make the Bat Cycle, quote, push its limits. But as far as I can tell, that never happens. But it really just kind of blue balls you into thinking that maybe you'll eventually get upgrades, and they just never come. After completing some rather simple challenges, you can unlock each of the characters' unique traversal abilities, and some are far better than others. Batgirl unlocks the ability to glide very similar to how Batman could in the Arkham games, and is by far the most efficient one. Nightwing's glider, only when properly combined with parkour, can be almost as efficient as Batgirl's glider. Red Hood has the mystical leap ability, allowing him to essentially walk on air and cover a good amount of distance while doing so. Finally, Robin makes use of the Justice League's teleporter to teleport short distances. Robin's ability is not great for going long distances, but it's great for gaining altitude quickly. As you can see on the screen now, all the green dots are fast travel locations. You unlock the ability to fast travel just after a few hours of gameplay, but first you must travel to each of the locations and complete a simple challenge to unlock that spot. As soon as this became available, I actually went and did them all immediately and unlocked all of the spots. This is actually one of the few games where I actually prefer to fast travel, since the other travel options are much slower.
Watching. Give it a second. It's the guy from Fortnite!
I think the gameplay is the thing I'm actually most torn on. I think the good does outweigh the bad, or I guess at the very least, there may be more bad things, but the bad things are more minuscule and don't carry as much weight as the several good things. I don't really know if what I just said makes sense, but I'm going with it. Unfortunately, I was too dumb to take notes while playing the game, so I'm just going to point out something that I think this game does really well, and then a couple of the smaller bad things that maybe you'll understand what I meant by my last statement. One thing I like about it was the AR system. It's essentially this game's version of detective mode, and it's useful for scanning the environment to find loot and other useful items. You can also use it to mark enemies, but I think this is something that Gotham Knights actually improved on compared to the Arkham games. In the Arkham games, you can really abuse detective mode. You can easily stay in it the whole time during a stealth section, with the only real drawback being a blue tinted screen. In Gotham Knights, however, you are forced to stay still while using the AR system. You can still tap the button to temporarily highlight things, but in order to actually mark the enemies, you are forced to stay still. Well, unless my game was completely busted. I know an over-reliance on detective mode was a common complaint about the Arkham games, and I think forcing you to stay still was a great way to nerf it. Like I said, the AR improvement was great, but there's also a lot of really small things that just really kill the pacing and bring you out of it. One big example is I would often be getting stuck on corners or invisible walls, especially in those stupid air vents. Oh my gosh. Another mildly infuriating thing that would happen to me a few times was I would be standing next to a small wall, I would try and run towards it to climb up it, but instead my character would run along the edge of it, which just leads to me wanting to throw myself off a bridge, and it was just so freaking annoying. Again, it's just a lot of small things that just are really noticeable. I should probably talk about the fact that this game is co-op, which is super cool, but I don't have friends that own the game. For the first several hours of the game, I actually had my game set to public unknowingly, and at some point some guy named Diaper joined my game, so we were able to actually play one of the Harley missions as Nightwing. Both of us were Nightwing, which is really interesting. I didn't know that's how that worked. I thought you could only be set as one single character each, but it's nice to know that if you both really want to be Nightwing, you can. I can't really talk a lot about the actual multiplayer aspect of the game since I did play solo for the majority, except for whenever I had my homie Diaper join me. For the first few hours of the game, I would flip-flop between all four of the characters to kind of get a feel for all of them, but I actually ended up playing as Robin the most, which I did not expect. Red Hood and Nightwing are actually my two favorite DC characters, so I fully expected to play as them the most, but Robin was a surprisingly great choice for solo players. I really liked Robin because I'm a big fan of stealth, and that is his main specialty. He can even take down the big characters in silent stealth or do one of the ambush attacks on the big characters, which is really useful for getting them out of the way before going into the main fight. Now again, I actually did like playing as all of them. Nightwing's acrobatics were really cool. Red Hood could hit like a truck, and Batgirl's ability to hack items and revive herself was also really cool.
Helicopter, helicopter.
I thought the combat in this game was fun most of the times. I think the animations are really cool, and the abilities, all the unique abilities that every person has, is pretty cool. And the takedowns are just absolutely brutal sometimes. And I actually think it's kind of neat that you can interrogate people. But I am 100% sure that evading only works half of the times. Similar to the Spider-Man games, this game doesn't have a counter necessarily. I mean, it kind of does. It has the evade, and then you could time your attack perfectly after that, which essentially counts as a counter, but it's not as simple as just clicking a single button like it was in the Arkham games, which I personally don't have a huge problem with, except for whenever the evade doesn't work. I feel like in the Spider-Man games, similar to this one, like I said, you can press the dodge button, and you'll still get hit sometimes, but I feel like in this one, I'm getting hit so often, even though I press the button. It doesn't seem super reliable. I'm not entirely sure where in the video I should throw this portion, so I'm just going to say it here. I know a lot of people didn't really like the idea of crafting and upgrading in this game, but personally, I don't really mind it. It seems very similar to how the Assassin's Creed series went. You know, they changed over to the more RPG system, and sure, I definitely prefer the old system, but I don't hate the new one so much that I'm going to hate the game for it. It's fine, I guess. Not the greatest, but not enough to make me not like the game. I also want to talk really fast about some of the thugs that you had to face, just a few of the enemy types. Now, most of them were fine, but there were a few that I really did not like whenever I first encountered them. The Godmother, because she had blades and could attack really fast, and the Talons, because they were also fast and super annoying, and then pretty much all of the ninjas, for the same reason, they attack fast, they have blades, and these guys can also teleport. But I think I can pretty efficiently take them all out now. But there is one enemy type that I think everyone universally hates. Those stupid drone masters are the worst thing to be added to this game. It is so annoying, they overwhelm you like crazy, and if you haven't played the game yet, you need to get into the habit of taking those guys out first. They are so annoying. Okay, from here on out, I am no longer concerned about spoilers, so if you are trying to preserve yourself, go ahead and click off now. You've been warned. So the game starts off with an almost 15-minute cinematic, which, again, I'm fine with, but you need to be aware of. I really wish there was some sort of warning, because once you're in it, you are locked in for a while before you actually get to start playing. But anyways, essentially the cinematic is Batman killing himself and taking out Ra's al Ghul with him. So, Batman is gone. It is now up to Nightwing, Red Hood, Batgirl, and Robin, with some help from Alfred, to pick up where he left off. You begin by investigating Dr. Kirk Langstrom, which is a name you might recognize if you're familiar with the comics or if you played Arkham Knight. You eventually go on to find out that the Court of Owls is no myth. This secret society has been pulling the strings from behind the curtains for a very long time. Eventually, it is revealed that Batman's uncle, Jacob Kane, is their current leader. After defeating him in what I thought was finally the end of the game, while being taken into custody, he is murdered by Talia al Ghul. It is at this point where you finally discover why Langstrom was murdered. He was experimenting with a Man-Bat serum. After beating a few Man-Bats, you can now pursue Talia, who is the new leader of the League of Assassins. She plans to use a serum in her takeover of Gotham. Eventually, we are led back to the Batcave, where Talia has taken over and has also gotten her hands on a new Lazarus Pit. Talia resurrects Batman, forcing him to fight you. After convincing him you are on his side, you fight Talia. During this fight, Batman sneaks over to the Batwing, where he sacrifices himself once again to put a stop to the Talia takeover and setting back the few remaining Court of Owl members for a very long time. Okay, so overall, I'd say the story was pretty okay. I mean, it was definitely predictable at times, but again, for the most part, I actually really liked it. Something I didn't even mention was the whole penguin side of things. I thought that was neat. I did not script this part. I'm going just right off the dome. But yeah, like I said, I think the story was okay. Nothing too crazy, but again, nothing that bad. Okay, I have been editing this video for so long, and it's already getting longer than I wanted it to be. So I'm just going to start rattling off these final, just closing thoughts that I haven't even touched on yet. So buckle up. Okay, so for starters, I actually really liked the character development in this game. I really liked watching all those character-specific cutscenes throughout. Like, it really helped flesh out the characters a lot, and it actually made them seem like a family. Just a few of my favorites were whenever Jason told Tim that he should actually mourn and grieve Bruce's death. I also like the one where Red Hood pushes Nightwing off of a building and gets noticeably worried whenever he thinks that he hurt him. I like the scene where Batgirl says that she has a photographic memory but can't remember what her dad looked like. And I like the one where they made Red Hood help them cook all the food. I think they did a good job of actually humanizing Red Hood. Okay, so there were also 3 other like main side stories that happened. There was a Harley side story, Mr. Freeze one, and a Clayface one. The Harley story was decent, and the fight at the end was okay. Again, nothing too crazy. The Mr. Freeze section was, once again, decent. The first fight against him was not good. The best way to do it was really just sit behind that big thing in the middle. I don't remember what it was called, but just stand behind it and then just peek out as much as you can and shoot him. But I will say the second fight against Mr. Freeze was really good. It may have been my favorite boss fight in the entire game. And then finally there was the Clayface missions, which I liked the first fight. And I really liked the first 2 stages of the second fight, but the final stage in that second fight was one of the hardest fights I've definitely had to do in this game, but one of the hardest parts in any game I've ever played. It was crazy. So the last thing I just want to very quickly touch on was all this, like the extra like crime things that just happened throughout the city. I actually liked all of them. I thought they were pretty fun. I personally preferred any of the ones that can be stealth, just because I prefer stealth. But there wasn't any of them that I actually disliked that I can think of, or like right off the top of my head. I even liked the Bat Cycle trials, which, you know, I complained about that a lot earlier, but they were actually okay. You had plenty of time to complete them, and it was just pretty fun. I've picked up several of the Batarangs. I completed all of the audio logs, the hidden cache things, and I found a few of the building plaques, and I have found one single graffiti so far. So I'm gonna be pretty far out before I 100% the game, but I do plan on doing so. So yeah, I think overall I'd probably just give this game like a 5 or a 6 out of 10. Which, quick reminder, this is not a high school project. A 5 out of 10 is middle of the road. It's not a failing grade. I think a lot of people, you know, forget that sometimes. But yeah, I'd say probably 5, maybe a 6. I thought it was gonna be like a 3 out of 10. I was really concerned. That's why I think it's surprisingly good.